As food prices have been rising over the past few months and Beijing has been feeling the pinch. Part of the action taken by the Chinese government has been a massive arrest of corrupt officials, large and small, in the food system. The question is, will this work? China has been having a systematic shortage of food. On the one hand, large tracts of good land have been polluted by industry or used as industrial land. On the other hand, the Chinese Communist Party's policy of suppressing food prices has made peasants unwilling to grow food, and a large influx of peasant workers into the cities has left much of the arable land barren. Food has been in short supply forever. The Chinese Academy of Social Sciences has estimated that by 2024 or 2025, China may have a grain deficit of 130 million tons. According to data from the General Administration of Customs of China, China's food imports hit a record high of more than 160 million tons in 2021, an increase of 18% over the same period in 2020. In other words, the actual food shortage in China has long exceeded the predictions of Chinese academics, as there is no way to falsify the amount of grain imports by customs. At the end of 2021, USDA statistics show that China has more than half of the world's stocks of corn, rice, wheat, and other major grains. The Communist Party's top brass has recognized that China's self-sufficiency in food is critically low and that the import pipeline is having problems now. In the face of rising food imports and a declining food self-sufficiency rate, in April 2022, Communist Party leader Xi Jinping published an article in an internal publication stating, "We must firmly control our food security proactively. More or less food is a tactical issue, but food security is a strategic issue." Now Beijing has made food security a national priority, sharply increasing its imports of corn, soybeans, and wheat. It suggests that China's food supply is growing more dependent on foreign imports, which makes it more vulnerable to impacts from international political and economic changes. With the global situation getting worse, it is no wonder that the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, is so worried. The prices of many food items, including wheat, various grains, meat, and oil, have soared in recent months. These have been driven by a range of factors, including rising fertilizer and energy costs over the past year, as well as supply disruptions caused by the Russian-Ukrainian war. Due to the war in Ukraine, the normal supply of food products such as wheat, corn, and vegetable oil produced in Ukraine has been disrupted. Compared to a year ago, the price of wheat has soared by more than 50%. Some countries have started to restrict food exports. For example, India has restricted wheat and sugar exports. Indonesia has restricted palm oil. Malaysia has restricted the export of chicken, etc. An unfortunate outcome could be that more countries will join in closing their borders, bringing the entire flow of food to a halt. When the flow of food stops, it will make the global food situation even worse. Rice, a staple food for more than half the world's population, may be the next target. According to the latest data released by the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations in early June of 2022, international rice prices have risen for 5 consecutive months, reaching a 12-month high. The Thai Prime Minister said in late May 2022 that Thailand and Vietnam should jointly raise rice prices to improve their bargaining power in the global market. Thailand and Vietnam are the world's second and third largest rice exporters, respectively, together accounting for about 21% of global exports. Higher rice prices could seriously affect many Asian countries. China, the Philippines, and Bangladesh are currently the largest rice importers. In response to the food crisis, one action taken by the Chinese government that's characteristic of the Red System has been to begin mass arrests of corrupt officials in the food system. The communist media has called such corrupt officials shuoshu, meaning giant rats. The first such rat was Xu Ming, a former member of the CCP's State Food Bureau and its deputy director who fell from power in July 2021. The following month, the State Supervisor Commission of the Central Commission for Discipline Inspection, CCDI, launched a nationwide campaign to tackle corruption in the purchase and sale of grain, and they visited many cities in China to conduct special inspections on grain-related issues. The northeastern province of Heilongjiang is China's top grain-producing province. During the local 45-day inspection, a retired former director of the Provincial Grain Bureau was investigated. This person is the first director at the level of the Provincial Grain Bureau to fall after the special rectification was carried out. The current director, who replaced the retired one, was also investigated on April 18, 2022. As of mid-April this year, the province's disciplinary authorities had launched investigations against 1,009 people with a total of 686 active cases. As of mid-June, according to official Chinese media statistics, in addition to the aforementioned central-level officials in the grain system, at least 7 other provincial grain enterprise leaders, as well as 7 former heads or high-level officials of provincial grain bureaus, were investigated after the special rectification. The website of the State Supervisory Commission of the CCP's Central Commission for Discipline Inspection, CCDI, has centrally published about 70 typical cases of corruption in the field of grain purchase and sale around the country. A group of rats in grain silos have been called out. The problem of rats in the Chinese food system has been around for a long time, but it seems it hasn't been taken seriously until now. The massive arrests in the grain system that began last year show that the grain problem is becoming too serious to be ignored. Then why are there so many rats in China? Under the strict household registration system, Chinese people are classified into rural and urban households. It is difficult for peasants to get out of their rural status. They are assigned a task by the party central committee, which is to grow food. However, there is no ownership of land by the peasants. The land is owned by the rural collective. Before the epidemic, the average income of rural households was about 1/3 of that of urban households. Peasants can barely support themselves and their families by farming. As a result, nearly 300 million rural residents move to the cities each year in search of work. This year, we will promote a sound mechanism to protect peasants' income from growing grain, strive for a policy to cover the cost of growing grain, increase sales volume operationally, raise the minimum purchase price of rice and wheat appropriately, policy-wise. It is to let peasants grow food and make money without losing money, and also get as much profit as possible. That is to say, the top officials of the Ministry of Agriculture of the CCP are well aware that for the past 70 years or so, peasants have not been able to make any money from growing food. This is because grain is purchased by the state, and the price of grain purchased by the CCP is so low that it deprives profits from grain production. In agriculture, the CCP has always adopted a planned economy. What the peasants grow and how they grow is decided by the central government and the local party branches. The many costs of growing food are, however, borne entirely by the peasants. Staple food crops cannot be marketed at will, and peasants must first turn in most of their grain at a fixed, communist-priced rate before it can enter the market if there is any surplus. See here, when the wheat is still green, the government sends people to keep an eye on it, and stresses to the peasants that growing food is a political responsibility.
The first point I want to make is to raise your awareness that growing food is not only a job, but also a political responsibility.
It is this typical planned economy system that has given rise to a great deal of corruption in official circles and giant rats in the process of buying and storing grain by the government. In other words, the CCP has turned what should be normal market behavior into government control. It tightly controls land use rights and food inputs and outputs. The existence of the CCP regime is the real root cause. of agricultural backwardness, the prevailing poverty and discrimination against the peasants, and now the food crisis in China. Now another typical move that accompanies a planned economy is the Great Leap Forward campaign to restore farming. In late March 2022, fearing a massive food crisis in China, Xi Jinping ordered local governments to carry out a replanting campaign. For example, Guangdong province is asked to replant about 800,000 mu, or over 53,000 hectares within a year. People and officials alike are so helpless that in some places, they simply cover the concrete with a thin layer of soil and plant some so-called crops to handle inspections. A large number of profitable seeding and breeding grounds were forcibly closed down by the authorities. And even public facilities that had been built for years were replastered with soil to put on a show of farming. Victimized people who tried to protest against this movement are suppressed forcefully by the officials. If you are interested in this topic, you can click on the video link at the bottom of the video for an episode we did in the past. The massive resurgence of outbreaks in China in 2022 has hit food production hard. It is not just the outbreak itself, but also the communist system that is causing problems. A month back, a strange phenomenon emerged in epidemic-stricken China. In some major grain-producing provinces, there was widespread harvesting, buying, and selling of green wheat. The winter wheat sown in 2021 grew into green seedlings in May 2022 and was expected to be ready for harvest in another 20 days or so. However, a group of buyers emerged from nowhere and offered to buy the wheat seedlings, which will be matured in 1 month at a high price to make feed for livestock.
看多少人收麦子呢？3000一亩，谁买啊？谁买麦子？
平常人家还下手都完了，听不见。你还教我都。
3000一亩。
The seedlings in the video could be bought for 2,000 or even 3,000 yuan per mu, while 1 mu of mature wheat could only sell for 1,200 yuan. Some people suspect that the CCP has suspended the import of feed from the international market due to epidemic prevention, resulting in a shortage of feed. Therefore, seedlings are bought at high prices and used as feed. Others even suspect that it is related to the CCP's internal struggle and that Xi's opponents may have used this tactic to disrupt and destroy the unripe wheat, thus exacerbating this year's food crisis. Because of the CCP's insistence on a zero-COVID policy, officials in many places have a variety of interpretations on issues such as if it's okay to do grain harvesting. Some won't allow peasants to go out to do farm work and harvest grain for the sake of outbreak control, avoiding any chance of infections that could affect the officials' careers. This phenomenon occurred in 2021, and in 2022 it has become more evident. In this village, peasants are working in the field at night. In history, people have done everything on the sly, but they have never seen anyone doing farming on the sly. But that's what happened here. Look, peasants are planting at night, secretly. They have no choice. There are also peasants who are caught by the police for planting during the outbreak and are made to apologize publicly in the villages. Now the outbreak is very serious. My mistake is that I am a bit insensitive to the situation. In some areas, cameras are even installed in crop fields to see and track which families are out in the fields, in violation of the stay-at-home rule during the outbreak. On May 27th and 28th, Chinese Vice Premier Hu Chunhua was in Henan Province, a major grain-producing province, to supervise the timely harvest of grain. It is said that the vice premier personally went to the major agricultural provinces to supervise the harvest in accordance with Xi Jinping's instructions. But there are only a few officials at the central level, and it is impossible to supervise all the large and small rural areas of the country. At the grassroots level, where corruption, incompetence, and bureaucracy run deep, many peasants have encountered strange interference and obstacles in the production and harvesting of food. Here, peasants can only harvest wheat secretly at night because local experts have advised the leaders to ban the use of harvesting machines because it is not environmentally friendly. So the peasant's option is to use the machine secretly at night and harvest manually during the day. I had to use a scythe to pick up the wheat. It was so hot that I was dying. Oh, darn experts. Ugh. Summer is the first wave of the harvest season, but floods also follow. Chinese officials would classify such situations as natural disasters. Chinese media reported in May that the Chinese agriculture minister said, "Some time ago, we went to the grassroots for research, and many grain growers and scientists told us that this year's seedlings were the worst in history." The minister said that China's grain production is facing great difficulties, most notably due to the impact of the unusual floods last fall. Bloomberg reported that natural disasters in China damaged nearly 30 million mu of crops in 2021, with record-breaking rains in July in Henan province alone damaging 2.1 mu of farmland. The floods also delayed the planting of more than 18 million mu of field, about one-third of China's total winter wheat acreage. The number of primary and secondary crops, or more than 2.7 million seedlings per mu of land, was down more than 20% this year from previous years. The report also points out that the impact of the disaster is multifaceted. In addition to directly reducing crop yields, it will also cause peasants to lose confidence and reduce their willingness to work in agriculture, causing the related workforce to decline along with them. If you watched our video last summer, you will have the impression that China's summer floods are violent. And a lot of good lands were flooded, not because of the intensity of the flood itself, but because of the poor quality of China's nearly 100,000 dams. In order to prevent the dams from collapsing or flooding the cities upstream due to excessive water storage, local officials often let the dams open without warning, destroying the farmland and hurting the people at the bottom of China, the peasants. In June, it will all start again.